Hey everybody, we're going live. Welcome to today's session of Ask an Expert. Today we're going to be talking about working with spectral data and FCS Express. We're going to give you a couple of minutes to come in and join us. It's about 4 minutes until the top of the hour. We're going to start right at the top of the hour. Look forward to answering your questions and working with you as we work with spectral data and FCS Express. Just a quick reminder, as we're waiting to get started, this is an informal format. This is your time to get the support that you need. So if you do have questions about how to work with your spectral data, please feel free to use that chat box in YouTube. We're going to be monitoring that. We will answer your questions live. We want to make sure that you get the most out of FCS Express and that you can optimize your analysis possibilities. Just a couple more minutes before we get started. Today, we're going to be talking about working with spectral data and FCS Express. This is your opportunity to ask an expert. If you have any questions about how to work with your data, if you're running into any difficulties, please let us know. Put something in the chat. We're monitoring that. This is your opportunity to have those questions asked in real time without having to contact us through support. We want to make sure that you get the most out of FCS Express, and hopefully this is a tool that you can use to get more out of the analysis capabilities that are offered in FCS Express. All right, everybody, it looks like we are at the top of the hour. My name is Robin Komacheka. I'm going to be one of your Ask an Experts specialists on the line today. I am joined by my colleague, Holly Bonar, and today we're going to talk about working with your spectral data. So before we get all of that started, we're going to start with some fun facts. It is Friday the 13th, so I thought this was a little bit funny as we get kind of acclimated into the swing of things for the New Year's. Don't give him any more work to do. Can't you see he's exhausted? And if you know what those tags are, you totally get this silly little joke. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started with working with our data. in FCS Express. So some of the things that we're going to talk about to get this started is user options for Spectral instruments. Hey Holly, how many questions do we get pertaining to user options about Spectral data?
Oh my gosh. Like, if I could put a percentage on it, it's got to be at least a quarter of all of our questions. Wouldn't you think? It's pretty heavy. It's pretty high.
Yeah, it is. We definitely get a lot of questions. So if you go to our user options, which is found on the File Options tab, it will open up this FCS Express user options. You'll see this data loading option, FCS file options. You'll expand both of those and then pick your instrument specific settings here. Here you're going to see some of the instruments that we offer the ability to have instrument specific settings here. So you'll see our Cytec and our Sony instrument. And if I do a quick restore here, you're going to also see that we have some thermo Bigfoot data settings here as well. So those spectral instruments, there might be some settings that you need to adjust. One that comes up often for our spectral users for Cytec is how do I see all of my channels of data? So this little option here to delete the fluorescent parameters after spectral merge is super important, especially if you're working with your raw data files. If you want to see all of those detectors, you have to uncheck that box.
Yep, that's one of the options that inspires panic in people when it's checked and then they go and look and see and they have no fluorescence parameters, right?
Yep,
So not to
every time.
not to panic, just go and check like what Robin said. So
Absolutely. So if you're just seeing your scatter parameters, forward scatter and side scatter with a Cytec data file, that's a raw data file, you know it's likely that box. Just uncheck that box. You'll be able to, and then refresh your data. So on the data tab, there is this option to refresh. This is probably one of my favorite new implementations in 7 is that we have the ability to just refresh our data. It will reload it and it'll make sure that you can then see all of those channels. Now, with some of our other instruments, you have to create a virtual spectra from the data files. You can now do this with data that's coming from a spectral instrument and also from overdetermined systems. So if you're looking at 40 different parameters and you want to create that into some kind of virtual spectra, we offer tools for you to do that because we know spectral data is such a big talking point nowadays. So if you go to our Tools tab and go to Transformations, we're going to insert that pipeline. And then under our miscellaneous folder here, you're going to see merge to spectra. Here, when we bring in a data file, you'll be able to choose all of the channels or parameters that you want to introduce into a spectra. You can name these different spectras. You can group them, if you wanted to do like laser lines, red, blue, violet, etc. You can do all of that. Now, we're just touching very lightly on this today. We do have resources available for you. So I'm going to click over to that so you can see that. We have this great webinar about creating and working with virtual spectral data. Again, you can use that with spectral instruments as well as overdetermined systems. So you have a lot of options here on how to work with your spectral data. So you'll find that right on our YouTube channel. Just look for creating and working with spectral data, and you can watch this video and get the information that you need to kind of work through that if that's where you're headed. Now let's talk about unmixing. Unmixing is great. We can do it here in FCS Express. Of course, you can do it on your instrument as well. If you bring it in from the instrument, FCS Express will bring in those unmixed data files, and you'll be able to just move ahead and move forward using that unmixed data file. If you are going to be using FCS Express to unmix your data files, of course, we have different laser lines, right? So whatever your system has, we're going to be able to separate out, and then you'll be able to also see in FCS Express, we can bring in your signature across all the lasers. So this is just changing a parameter just like you would with any 2D plot. This is just our spectrum plot to show you those signatures so we can see the differences of how our floors are operating. How can we separate this out, right? How do we decide what channels are peaks and things of that nature? That kind of brings us into the unmixing part. So of course, our unmixing you can do from the tools and transformation, compensation on a mixing window. It looks like I already have it open there. And then here we'll see that we can just add a new unmixing. And it kind of has a similar setup to what you would do if you were creating a compensation matrix. So if you're familiar with compensation, there's a couple little deviations or changes, but in general, if you have a good idea of how our compensation works, our unmixing is very similar. Holly, with unmixing, how do you feel it is when you first try it for the first time? for unmixing?
I think it's actually, especially, you were talking about how similar it is to compensation, in terms of the wizard part of it. Like, I feel like our wizards are really set up very well to have those like step-by-step sort of instructions on how to do it. I feel like it can come off as intimidating at first, like, oh my gosh, like how do I do this in mixing? But you really just kind of have to do what the wizard tells you to do, and it all like updates in real time, right? So when I really especially like that step 4 where the view errors and warnings. So if you do something wrong or if something's not working, the software does a really great job of kind of telling you sort of what the problem is and maybe what you might have to do to fix it. So it's definitely not something to be intimidated by at all. And you can certainly, try it out and see what you think about it.
Yeah, and one of the messages that often comes up in this window as we're speaking about like some errors is sometimes you can have a message that something is showing up in the same channel, right? So you'll get a message that
Mhm.
this and this are showing up in the same place so that the peak channel is being chosen as the same for them. So that's one of the things to that you're going to see. But again, we offer a lot of information about what exactly is happening and where that error is. So it's really easy for you to kind of unfold and figure out, oh, okay, so I just need to fix this, need to go and look at my data and see if maybe for whatever reason the wrong channel was chosen and I need to
Yeah.
update that. Um,
Yeah, I think the other really great thing about this is that in addition to like it is with compensation, is that if you have mixed media type samples going on, so you've got some beads, you've got some cells, it's really super easy to add like all the controls for those and to do all of those in one unmixing experiment. So no need to be intimidated by that either. The wizard makes it really easy.
Yep, exactly. And same with mixed media, right? We can use a data specific gate so that we're not creating a second scatter gate. We're just moving it to a more appropriate place if we're working with mixed media. And sometimes even in this experiment specifically, we have different cell types. So I can't just use a single scatter gate because other times it's not appropriate to actually see the fluorescence that I'm looking for on the cells because it's not the right cell population. So you have that flexibility, you have that customization that you can do. And again, kind of like with our compensation, once I have all my files in here and I create and I select my spectral parameter, the software really picks up and does the rest of the work, right? We're going to generate this scatter plot here. And then we're going to start generating these control plots where I can actually look at the channel selected. So this is a UV14. I can look and make sure my marker is actually getting stained. I can check my scatter gate because I want to make sure, especially in this experiment, that I'm getting the right population, right? Because there's some things like I'm not going to get a good signal for certain populations if I have the wrong thing selected, right? So if I have the lymph population selected, I'm not going to get a good monocyte population showing. So I had to increase or move that scatter gate to make that data specific here so that I could then see my peak so that I could help the software kind of define and separate out this a little bit better. So again, very similar to like our compensation, you can create an unmixing, you can right click and then export it. I'm a huge fan of doing my unmixing or compensation in separate layouts. Everybody has their own thing. I just kind of get worried about page management, right? If for this experiment, I think I have like 15 pages if I do my unmixing. So I like to keep those in separate spaces, export out my unmixing, and then import it into a new workspace. One thing also that I really love that we have implemented in the software is when you do those unmixings, when you start generating this information, you get a visualized mixing matrix so you can see how things are kind of getting separated and parsed out and pulled apart. You can see our spillover spreading matrix, right? So we know the influence from fluorochromes, and then we can see the cross stain. So it gives us a lot of information about our panel, how things are working, influencing one another, where we need caution, where things are working well. Just kind of gives you some ideas, right, of like how things are interacting, how these floors are behaving once they're in the same space.
Yep. So one thing real quick, Robin, before you move on, I wanted to mention that I've personally gotten some questions from people about this conditional formatting that we see here. So these purple and red colors here, and people were worried that, oh, if this is red, it is bad, and if it's purple, it's good, and what does that mean? And I think it's more to draw your attention to these numbers. So the software is never going to tell you this number, this particular unmixing, this index matrices number is bad or good or whatever. Ultimately, those are decisions that you need to make about your own data. But it's more to draw your attention to what these numbers are and whether they're increased or decreased, just so you can get an idea of what's happening with your calculations.
That is such a fantastic point. Yes, and these colorations, like just like what Holly was saying, is like this is just based on kind of thresholds. We've just created some thresholds that show you some colors to kind of highlight what's changing, what's not. Again, you get to make the final call. This is not saying that something is wrong and you need to throw your whole unmixing out the window.
Yep.
It's just kind of indications that, oh, you might have a little more spillover here. But again, like you might have some more spillover, but if they're on two different cell types, what does that really mean, right? So just be mindful, just know your data and trust the process. When you bring your unmixing and you apply it to your sample, if it looks good, you can trust that. It's not, if you see unmixing errors, then of course you can always revisit this and make adjustments and update things so you have that level of control. So that's another reason why I kind of like having them in two spaces. I can be working on my analysis. I import that matrix, and if I see something is a little weird, I can just be like, okay, let me slow down and kind of parse through that. But that was a great point. Thank you so much, Holly, for that. Now, importing and unmixing matrix, I said, you can export these things out and then bring it in. That's probably one of my favorite parts, right? Because you can get, I don't want to manage 15 extra pages in my data analysis if that data analysis is already standing alone pretty intense. So we open up that compensation and a mixing window, if we do a right click, we can import that compensation. So I'm going to bring this over here. And I do want to point out that by default, when we open up this to import, sometimes it starts with this compensation file indicator, if you will. If you see this, you might freak out and be like, oh my gosh, I totally did not export my unmixing properly. Don't worry. So this is a big thing. Just use this drop down. I usually just change it to all files so that I can calm my nerves. When I do that, you'll see your unmixing pop up. Then you can just click on your unmixing file, click open, and it's going to bring it in. So now I have my unmixing here. Just like compensation, if I bring something in and I don't set it to default, it might not be applied to my samples. So that's kind of another important thing to consider. It's similar to the unmixing or the compensation as well. Those defaults in the user options, all right, are going to be really important about how we're using our compensation unmixing. So we want to make sure that we have the right setting and that we're applying the unmixing as expected. If we want this to apply to our samples, we're going to have to right click and then set it as default. All right, so now we've got kind of the background stuff already established, right? We've worked through some of our user options. We've talked about our virtual spectra. We've done a little bit just touching on the unmixing and then importing and then a mixing matrix. Now let's talk about analysis. When we move to analysis, it gets pretty simple. It's just like working with just about any other data file. So, you can drag and drop a data file in here. You can insert a plot and select a data file. You can use the blue plus icon. I'm kind of old school. That's, I guess, my way to go. So I just kind of grab my data file here, insert it. Now it's in my data list, and then I like to drag and drop it in. Again, you'll have all the choices, the similar choices that you would working with any other data file. When I bring it in, we're going to see I had set that unmixing transformation or applied the unmixing so that it's already applying to my data set. And now when I start looking at my detectors, I'm going to see all of my unmixed data files here at the bottom. Now, I know the naming can be a little bit long, right? We have this, I'm working from a raw data file. So I have all my channels because I unchecked that box because I wanted you to see all of my individual detectors. But now at the bottom, I have all of my unmixed parameters here. So these are my unmixed parameters. The ordinary least squares is kind of the default behavior nomenclature, if you will, that we add. You can totally change that because that is not my favorite. I'll be honest that I generally change this. And if you see it and then you're like, yep, nope, I don't like that. When we go to our unmixing options, you can change this. Now, if we change it here, so like I can change this to unmixed and then okay. The next step will really be to reload that data. So I do a quick refresh. just refresh, check that data file, and reload. So that I want that unmixing name then to be changed when I'm accessing these parameters. It's just a little shorter, a little bit more manageable. Of course, you don't have to have, you can make this to whatever it is that you choose. I like to just have something so that I know exactly where I am. With our parameters, same thing stands. You don't have to dig through all 60,000 different parameters. Start typing. It's going to drill down that list for you, so you don't have to work so hard. So then we have the ability to kind of get to our parameters just as easy if we were working with something else. All right, I'm going to just start creating some gates here. Oh, see, I think I might already have a hierarchy. Let me see here. Sometimes I do some work in the background and forget that I've done it. So we'll just insert that gate view. And look, we've already got something already built. That's kind of great. Doesn't happen if you start in a new layout, but if you're doing some work, sometimes that'll pop back for you. With our gate window, if you right click, you can expand all. So then I can see what kind of gates I've already established. Now, one of the things that I really do like, right? So I kind of forgot that I had this gating hierarchy in the back. And when I put in my first plot, I don't see any gates. One of the features that's really nice is that you can decide or tell the software when and what gates to show. So if I right click on a plot, I can do show gates. And then I can select the one, right? So I've selected one gate here for my limps. I can also do the show gates and select all. So now everything's going to show. And now I know you're like, okay, that's great, but I have no statistic boxes, Robin. What the heck is really going on? If you right click here, you can recreate all of those text boxes with the statistics, and then you can just kind of relocate those to make sure that they're working and you're getting the information that you like. Now, this monos gate, as you can see, has kind of gotten tucked under our grands gate. We have this great new feature to activate a text box. Let me see if I can find it. There we go. And sometimes it's hard to choose which one because they're numbered. But if you just choose one of them, it will highlight that so that you don't have to go and move the gate or kind of make any other adjustments. I can now just grab that text box and pull it over, right? So it kind of gives you that flexibility to get to gates or text boxes that have gotten trapped behind other pieces without you having to move everything else around. Now, one of the things about unmixed data, so when we kind of go back to those user options, you do have the ability to bring in both your unmixed and your raw data. And that's so you can also use spectral plots. If you're looking at spectral data, spectral plots can just be a bunch of fun to work with. So I'm going to pull out this limps gate. Oops, and I actually want to, do something different. I'm going to insert our spectrum plot here. Holly, what is your favorite part of spectral analysis? I know this is a loaded question, so you'll have to forgive me.
Honestly, and you might laugh when I say this, it really is like the visual part of these spectral plots.
Same.
Because I am such a visual person, and I feel like most people who do flow cytometry and like truly love it are probably visual people and enjoy the actual pretty pictures. Um, and I just feel like FCS Express just really does a great job visually with all of the things. And you can gate on different populations using standard plots or standard color plots or density plots, kind of the same way you would on a spectral plot. And like we can probably show here how you can still gate on things, and you can take a spectral plot, apply a gate to it, and all of the things you would do with a normal plot. But I really feel like it just adds to the visual effect of whatever reports and whatever presentations that you're trying to do. So I just really like that piece of it. I just think it really makes things look nice.
Absolutely. That's the same thing. And I'm also kind of a color fan. Like I love colors and we get to play a lot with colors here. Let me see what happened here. I'm going to undo that. Let me see if I created a gate wrong here. Oh, I think I have my unmixing transformed. That should be good. Create new gates. We'll just replace a gate because that's always useful. If ever you find something has changed, you can always use this feature to just replace a gate. So we'll do CD3 positive there. Then I can drag and drop. And let's see, what did I do here? Huh, that's unusual. But somehow I have found a way to change this. Oh, I think it's because of the way that I created that gate there. but we're going to revisit that in just a second. One of the things that we can also do with any of our spectral plots is we can average out our signal here. And what I mean by that is with any kind of instrument where we're working with lights, we kind of get this spread and spill, right? So you can kind of see in the middle here that at this red point, this is like the same of any density plot. You're going to get, this is where the most of your cells are falling. So FCS Express does a really good job in the formatting part that you can change this from all spectrums to an average spectrum. So what it does is it kind of takes that same pathway of where those peaks are, peak density places are, and it plots them out for you. Now it does kind of do like the bidding, right? So for each of the detectors, you see that highest level point, but don't worry, we can do formatting to take you out of that. And what I mean by that is we can change this so we can connect this. It's called interpolation, and that's on our specific options here. We select the option to interpolate values, and then we can change how many points. So this is kind of similar to smoothing, like on a histogram. You can increase this as much or as little as you need to. And then you can also change this resolution here. So if you wanted to change the resolution to kind of make it more crisp, more clean, you do have the space and opportunity to do that. It's really about trying to figure out what is going to work best for your data set and what is the best way to display things. Um, we can do nice things like overlays, and then also some of the more traditional uses with our data set. You can do things like insert some of our greater tools or some tools that I really like when you're looking at a bunch of parameters, like heat maps. So you can do like a parameters heat map thing, and we can insert this with our data file, and we can start looking at parameters. So I know this looks completely overwhelming right now because we're looking across like tons and tons of different parameters here. We have all of our UV. But don't worry, we can use this drop down and use parameters to display, use only the ones that are checked, and then we can go down and we can start looking at the unmixed channels that we were interested in here. So right now we're kind of looking at all of the different, we don't have a gate applied, so it's just we're kind of looking across everything. So that, if you want to add gates, don't worry, you can always adjust that either in overlays. We can change the gate that's applied. And okay, so it looks like my gates are not applicable. So that's where we're going to start. We're just going to kind of right click, and I'm going to deselect all of these gates and kind of start building backwards and see if I can fix whatever is happening right now. We're going to add this gate. There we go. And then if we add this gate here, we can start seeing differences in our parameters. So I guess I have just a little bit of disconnect. I might have been working with maybe the unmixed file or a different data set that didn't have this unmixing transformed thing here. So when I created these gates, it's just as I needed to update them. Of course, like with our gates, you can replace a gate. So if you do run into something like this, like I did my initial analysis on an unmixed file, and then I'm moving to a raw data file because I wanted to do a comparison of maybe how the unmixing looked between the instruments or something else, you do have that flexibility to just replace gates as well. And then we can start using these new gates and see how things change. Also, like if I wanted to add additional overlays here, I can do that. Holly, what are some good questions that you've gotten about visualization of your um, data for spectral data?
I think mostly people get really maybe not confused, but concerned about just how it functions differently. So like they think because it's spectral data, then all of a sudden the analysis is going to be really hard. So and I'm just, as we're going through this, like you can see when you're using color plots, it really does function exactly the same way that non-spectral data does, right? Once the data is unmixed, your populations should resolve, ideally the same way compensated data from non-spectral data would work. So you really can think about it as it's just the data, it's the same kind of flow data you're used to working with. And then sort of next is like, how do I take advantage of these spectral tools that we do have? And so, getting to those plots, kind of what you're doing right there with the overlay, and like really using those tools to show things in a different way. So you can always do either or, right? Or
Yep.
both if
Or
you
both.
want to. if you don't want to mess with spectral plots, you don't have to, and then you just analyze your data the way you would non-spectral data. But you can also add these spectral things, these spectral elements, as an enhancement to what you're already doing.
Oops, here we go. Let me undo that a couple of times. I moved my gate weird.
And
And
isn't the undo button like the best thing ever?
oh
I
my
just
God,
want to say.
yes, it is
Because
probably
we all get there, right? We all
it is
get to where
my
we do
most
things and
used
we're like, and what has happened here? So let's just undo that and go back. So all of it's, designed to so that you don't have to etch a sketch into the world and restart over. You can just go back a couple steps and figure out what's going on.
And as I've been demonstrating today, like sometimes things just go a little left of center. And so don't worry about it. Like that's kind of part of the analysis. What we've tried to do with FCS Express is just to be able to adjust and figure out, okay, so if my gates aren't working, that means something has gotten a little wonky with my gates. What tools can I use to keep it moving? Having the ability to just replace the gates, because then I know, okay, one for one, I don't have to rebuild this hierarchy. They're going to go into the right place. I just kind of redraw the gates and keep moving. Having the ability to just kind of compare things, that's my favorite thing, right? Like when you have these big panels and you have 40 different colors or just a bunch of different things that are showing, being able to format things and make sure that you're getting the best visual, that's probably my favorite too. Like right now I'm going to just take this off. We're looking at the same sample. But if I format this a little bit further, right, I can start telling the software what gate I want to look at. So if I'm looking at the monos gate here, all right, great. So for the second sample, maybe I want to look at the gate one, which is I forgot to replace my grands with the gate one, but this is not, we can use gate one. We can keep dragging this on, and so then we can start seeing on and off features from our data, right? So I can look here. So I've got my grands, my monos. What do my lymphs look like, right? How is their expression differing? And then with the tools to format, we have this like great ability to change colors to make this really so you get the most out of your data, right? Sometimes with different color settings it's harder to see. Like before I wouldn't have been able to see these gradients here and some of the differences. So having the ability to really adjust things, average things out, really display this data and kind of bring it home in a way where I'm getting the most out of it, those are probably one of my favorite features also, because I like color. I'm a color girl.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think those parameter heat maps and changing these color levels around is, so it's a really good way to use this sort of as a screening tool if you wanted to. So like add these overlays and get a really quick idea. It's like, okay, that one really bright yellow square, that might be something. So that kind
yep,
of gives you a lead into going into something else. So maybe you don't have to draw a billion dot plots to
exactly.
find something different that's going on.
And if you see the names here, like some of our parameters, because we have so many and they're a bit longer, they will take up space for the next parameter. So if you make it big enough, you can change this. You can also change the angle so that the names show better. But yeah, you have a lot of flexibility. And like Holly was saying, if you're doing a quick screen, one of the things I like to do is do thresholds. So you can basically just say on. If it's below this, I set a value. And if it's below this, I change it one color. If it's above that, I change another. And then you just have off and on scaling and you can see, oh, this is it, this is it. You can quickly kind of look through a lot of information really quickly to see what's happening with your data. That's really a useful tool when you're just trying to glean as much information out with you. And when you have these huge numbers of parameters, right? That's what you really get the benefit out of spectral data. I can do 40 parameters pretty easily without concerns of like, is that a real signal? Is it not?
Yeah.
And being able to kind of check down and check on my data, that's super important.
Yep, and
Um,
you can do these overlays with different data files too if you wanted to. So here Robin just did the same data file with different gates, which is one perfectly good way to do it. But if you say have a treated and an untreated file and you want to see something that's, elevated or positive in one file versus the other, then you could add different overlays of different data files and do it that way as well.
Yep, there's always a ton of options. So, no matter what you're doing in FCS Express, however you're using these tools, if you have questions, if you get a little stuck, if there's something going on, don't worry. We've probably made all the mistakes as I've lovely put on display for you guys today. Like it takes a little work, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but in FCS Express, it really is easy to figure out the hows and whys and how to get back onto track, how to make it how to fix the thing so that you're able to recover and just pick up with your analysis. Um, so at this time, we're about to close out this session. I am so grateful that you guys have joined me for today's session about working with spectral data and FCS Express. If you have any questions, please, please, please reach out to us at support@denovosoftware.com. We are really your greatest asset. We're here to support you. We want you to get the most out of your analysis. And, it's always a pleasure working with you. So please don't feel like, oh man, I can't bother with them with this. This is such a silly question or wherever, I get in my own head a lot about that. So please use this as a resource. We really enjoy working with you. We want you to have analysis not be the crushing point, right? We want the experiments are hard. Getting all of this data and getting good data is difficult enough. When you get to analysis, we want it to be a good experience. We want you to be able to be successful and get the results that you want. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end our go live, but it has been my pleasure. Thank you, Holly, again for joining me. It's always great having these sessions with
Yep.
you. Um, I look forward to our next one, I think, and we're setting those dates. We're going to get back to our regular bi-weekly schedule when we hit February. We're just kind of getting you back into the groove with this one in January, but we're going to meet again in February and we'll have those dates for you soon. Thank you for joining me and have a wonderful weekend.